Guys, welcome back to another episode of The Deep End. This was actually kind of this one's kind of a special one. Our 1 year anniversary of doing this, or birthday, I should say. I don't know, birthday anniversary of doing this podcast just passed. We posted our first episode of The Deep End on December 5th, 2024, and it's crazy, man. I feel like this year has just flown by.
Wow, December 5th that was the first episode.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first episode on the deep end, or that was the one that we'd get, because we did this a few times on my channel.
Yeah, this was like the first official episode here on The Deep End. But you're right. I think we had like at least 3 or 4 conversations on your channel before we made it its own thing.
Wow, but nonetheless, that's just wow, special, man. Happy anniversary.
Yeah, same to you, man. Cheers. It's cool, man. Like I said, it's really flown by, and
cheers to you.
No, man. Like I said, it's really flown by. We've had some great conversations, and overall, it's been a good year. A lot of growth from these conversations. Hopefully, all of you guys tuning in have got something out of our unscripted gibberish as well. But man, had a good year. Looking forward to having another one.
You know, it's so special, I think, to have really gone through the year, man, with you and just with everybody in the deep end, because I really do get a lot out of our chats, and I get a lot out of people's comments. I get to see where other people are at in terms of their mindset, their thinking. I get to be challenged, both Ryan, by you and those in the chat. And that's growth. That's real growth when you can be challenged. I don't think people can actually grow in their silos, of the niches of investment styles that they have. And so I hope that what this next year brings about for all of us as investors is challenging times in terms of surrounding ourselves with people who are going to really push our buttons, and make us think. Because I'm excited to share that I am just beneath what I think is spectacular here, $420,000 in the brokerage account.
Jeez,
And
man.
when I think about that, the first thing that comes to mind is all of you. Because I've been challenged to grow. I've been challenged to think. And that's, I don't know, if I were off in my own little corner of the world, Ryan, I think I would have only known what I have known and stuck with it, and I just think talking to everybody and learning different investment styles and cherry picking, and it all helped, at the end of the day, to get me to where I'm at. So I really just want to say thank you to you and everybody else that's in my circle surrounding me as an investor, making me grow and pushing me to grow, pushing me to think. And I think that's special. I think that's what we really got going on here.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, man. I want to share something with you. So in a couple weeks, we'll do a full episode kind of recapping our goals going into this year and game planning for next year. But while we're on the subject, I do want to share that one of your goals for 2025, I know because I wrote them down. One of your goals for 2025 was to add like $100,000 in value to your portfolio. And that was starting at a portfolio value of $235,000. So based on that goal, I mean, you were only supposed to get to $335K. And, lo and behold, you're almost a whole $100,000 past that initial goal. I mean, you didn't just beat that goal. It's almost like, in hindsight, you set the bar way too low. It's just crazy to see how far beyond that you've gone, man. So hats off to you. Good job.
I set the bar too low. Yeah.
But even so, even so, that adding $100,000 in portfolio value still is like, that's a pretty crazy feat, and you've practically doubled that.
Yeah, look, I want to say, again, yes, that's come from changing my investment strategy, going against the grain, so to speak, from the niche that I was in. I also, though, Ryan, want to say that it took heavy sacrifice, but on the same token, it also took um, at some points the victories that I've had, because there were quite a few times throughout the year, if you remember, where I was jumping on and I would say, I just crushed this goal. I'm going to set another like mini goal here. So before the new year, and then I did it again. And the only time I didn't do it was actually, I think, one or two episodes again when I said we only have a month left and I'm not going to set some crazy goal. I'm just going to roll into the new year with what I have. I think I threw out arbitrarily the number 425,000 or 400, whatever it was, 420 or 425.
Yeah.
But I'm not like aggressively attacking it, but yet here I am and I hit it. But I want to go back to what I was saying, right? It did take tremendous sacrifice, and it also took something I think is something you won't hear a lot of investors, especially fire type of investors, say, is it took I want to say like massive victory laps, because every time I was hitting my milestone financial goals this past year, I was like, I'm going to celebrate in a big way. Hence all like my vacation trips. I spent about this year just about $14,000 on vacations. And so just think about that. I could already put that 14K into the brokerage, and obviously, I'd be much higher, but it was necessary for me, and I think we spoke about this at one point or another, to celebrate in a big way, to get myself in the position to understand like more about myself, what I like, how I like to travel. And it makes me work harder knowing I don't want to go back to that. I don't want to go back to like how I used to vacation. A decade ago, man, I was staying in hostels. I don't ever want to go back to hostels. And not anything against hostels, but like I like what I like, and it motivates the heck out of me. So yes, heavy sacrifice while home in country, but tremendous victory laps once you hit your milestones.
I love that, man. It's actually like seeing the growth in your portfolio this year has really motivated me to and I think I felt it this year and definitely took action on it this year, because I've surpassed my portfolio value goals, well, mostly this year too. But going into next year, just seeing how much yours has grown, and knowing the sacrifice, and knowing, you know, just how much you've contributed to your portfolio this year makes me look at myself and think, man, I've done pretty good this year, but I'm really excited to do even more next year. And it's interesting because I'm not like getting down on myself for, I don't feel like I didn't do enough. It's not really that. It's more so like, man, I had a good year in the portfolio. Things are going swimmingly there. Things in life are going pretty good too. Everything's in check, and because of that, because everything is well balanced and everything's in a good spot, I'm excited. I'm really excited to do more in the portfolio this upcoming year. I feel like there were periods of time throughout this year where maybe I wasn't able to give it all of my attention, or as much as I would have liked to, just because of other things going on. I talked about saving for the car. We had a baby, obviously. This time last year, we were moving into our house. So I feel like, or not this time last year, this time last like October. But nonetheless, I feel like this last year and some change, there have been some things that have gotten in the way, and some big things, I should say. And I'm sure that in 2026 there will be things too, because there's just always things. That's a part of life. But going into this new year, I feel really excited to hit the ground running. And I don't have any like concrete goals yet. I haven't thought super deep about it. I'm excited to think more about it and share it with everyone in the next couple of weeks. But all of this is to say you have inspired me, sir. So thank you for that.
Yeah, man. Like it's kind of funny because it's what I said in the beginning. Like we were all growing together, And it takes a village. It really does take
Yeah.
a village. I'd be curious. I think, later on, just before the ending of this year, we will officially do like another video on our goals for the upcoming year. I'm excited to get to that. But just to nosh a little bit on like what's to come in a video like that, like we're gonna do. I'm running these numbers all the time, day in and day out at this point. And Ryan, you might find it interesting for yourself to do something similar. Just sit down every day and like rerun the numbers based on how much money's in your account now. It's so motivating for me, at least. And I wouldn't advise it for anybody who has like just a queasy stomach with volatility. But because that requires you to look at your account every day, and perhaps, you might not like what you see from time to time. But, for me, I like to sit every day and run the numbers, based off of my averages. So just the other day, I ran the new numbers off of like entering the new year. Again, it's crazy for me to think about this, man, with 420,000. So how long is it going to take me to get to the million, and what's the average return that I'm going to need per year? And it's actually not that staggering. So if I
Yeah.
continue to invest the way that I'm investing, it should take about 3 years to hit the million with about an 18% return rate.
That's a nice return. That's a very generous return.
It's a very generous return, but again, think about what I'm like heavily invested in at this point. Like it's possible. That's the reality.
It's possible.
Now I'm taking a big bet, and that's what people should know, is that I don't want anybody following suit with what I do. What I do works for me. Everybody has to do their own due diligence. Do your homework on your own investor profile, your own risk tolerance levels. For me, I just know that what I'm currently doing, I can sit in easily. I'm enjoying this journey. I'm okay with, as I always like to say, playing like a billionaire and potentially losing a lot of money, for the interim. That's not everybody, though. So over the next 3 years, I'll save my next year's goals for that video. But over the next 3 years, I mean, I really do hope to hit the 7-figure club.
Yeah, man, that's crazy. That will be so crazy. So here's the wild thing about compounding. So I think you're right. There's definitely a reality where it could be within 3 years. 18% is a very generous return, but stranger things have happened. Who knows what the market's going to do? It could do 20. It could do 2%. It could do 20%. Who knows? It'll be interesting to see what happens. But all that aside, even if you just got standard market returns, even if you just got 10% returns and you didn't contribute another penny into your portfolio. You just took that 420K, let it ride, 10% return. Just based on the math there, I mean, you would reach 850K in 7 years without having to do anything. So you'll double your portfolio at least, in 10 years or less based on that. And I would imagine at that point, you'd hit that, if at that 10% return, you'd be at that million probably by 10 years from now without even contributing anymore, which is crazy to think about. And that's the cool thing about getting to that point. And it's that thought right there that makes me think, man, I'm excited to do more. I'm excited to get to that point in my portfolio where the compounding really, really kicks in even more than it is now, because, even at 100,000, 110,000, I am seeing it like it's on a daily basis. We're getting, at least $100 on a bad day, $100 swings in either direction. And, like even that amount of money, $100 a day, great. That's nice. At the least. But yeah, it just gets crazier and crazier the bigger your portfolio gets. And I think that's why this is such a fun thing. You know what I'm saying? But in your portfolio, what I'm trying to get to is, even if you didn't do anything and just hung out, in the next 10 years, you'd probably be there.
Well, that's what's really exciting for me, is that I know I'm throwing out these numbers, 18%, right? And over the last couple of years, first of all, let me say that's actually not that crazy, right? Because the market's returned over 20.
Right.
So this is an important time now to say that past performance does not drive or is not indicative of future performance. So you do have to understand that. So this is all based off of me saying, if we have another year like this past year and 2 years ago, we could very much have a year like 2018 where we actually go negative, right? And I don't hit this at all, so you also have to factor that in. But again, I think what's cool, going based off of what you said, is knowing that I'm in this for like the next 30 years anyways. Even if I don't hit the 18%, let's say I hit 15% or 10%, right? It doesn't matter for me because the portfolio is going to go up either way and eventually be, thanks to compounding, I'm just going to hit the $1 million mark eventually. So it's like, yeah, I have this crazy
Yeah.
goal to do it in this allotment of time that I have for myself, but there's no stress on my end. This is something I was talking about with my brother as well. Kind of hitting coast fire really does alleviate a lot of stress, because right now, me just knowing, and I've talked about this so many times already, me just knowing what you just said, I don't need to add a single penny more. Thanks to compounding, it will come. That, I think, is the coolest aspect of what we're doing here as investors.
Yeah, absolutely. What was I going to say? I was going to say, going back to the returns to the market, not knowing what it does. Even if the market goes down these next 3 years, and this kind of ties into what you were just saying, you still have a very long time horizon. So, like, even hypothetically, if the market goes down over this next year, these next couple of years, I mean, you're not just going to sit on your hands. You're going to continue contributing to your portfolio. You're going to keep buying. And so even if you were in a position where you were, effectively buying the dip on whatever's in your portfolio, that's actually good. It's actually good in the long run for you too. And what you're doing in the meantime, even if that doesn't bring you to millionaire status in the next 3 years, in the interim, what's essentially happening is you're buying the dip. Is it's almost like you're pulling back this slingshot. This is kind of how I think about it. You're pulling back this slingshot and you're creating all this potential energy. And this is true on all portfolios in buying the dip on good assets. You're pulling back this slingshot, creating all this tension, all this potential energy. So when the market, when it does turn back around and starts going back up again, you're releasing that slingshot, and all that potential energy then becomes kinetic, and then that will drive even more growth for your portfolio, more growth than what you lost while that slingshot was being pulled back.
Yeah, 100%. And that's something, by the way, I've also thought about just earlier today, because I said, Ari, what happens if like the market just tanks over the next year? And does the total, it goes down 20%, And in my mind was immediately like, well, then you would double down on your strategy, because over the next 2 years, you would be, you use the slingshot. I'm thinking about more like a rocket, right? I'm like getting the countdown ready for the
Yeah.
launch, because I know that what goes down is bound to go right back up over the longer span of time. And again, that's taking out any crazy penny stocks or any crazy volatile, investments that are out there. We're talking about, the S&P 500 or a broad, based fund. So again, what goes down is the greatest, preparation buying time for you just to buy. And by the time you come back to it, I mean, give it a year or two, maybe 3 years tops, you're probably already returning much more, if not the most you've ever returned thanks to that dip.
Yeah. Yeah. In terms of dollars, because you've built up more, a bigger pool of assets. And so those returns are just going to be spread across a larger pool of assets, I should say, which will push your dollar value up amount even more. And I want to hear from you guys real quick in the comments or in the live chat here, if there are any of you guys tuning in. and obviously no one can predict the future, but what do you guys think? Like going into 2026, any thoughts, any predictions, any feelings about what might come in the year ahead? It's probably too soon to tell, obviously, and once again, no one can predict the future. But what's your gut saying? What are you feeling? Let us know in the chat. Let us know in the comments below. And I also want to say, um, we are doing something a little bit different today. If you're watching this on YouTube, this episode was recorded, but we actually are live streaming this conversation on Riverside, which is what we use to record a lot of our videos. And moving forward, probably what we'll do is we will be doing these live streams here on YouTube where you can still join in the chat, join in the conversation, and hang out with us as we're recording these episodes. But then we'll probably upload it to YouTube after. And just for full context, the reason we're doing that is because it just makes it a bit easier to edit. Riverside, and this isn't a plug for Riverside, I don't think any of you really care about that, but it's got a ton of great features for us creators. And so it really is helping us do more with this podcast, put out more content, put out better content. And we'll continue to announce these conversations before they happen, so you guys have the opportunity to join in with us. But yeah, we'd love it if you guys still would tune in and hang out with us live and chat with us in the live chat. Effectively, for you viewers, it's the same thing, whether it's on Riverside or on YouTube. But for us, it does make a world of difference. So, and I apologize for any inconvenience. I just wanted to throw that out there. So sorry for the sidebar, man. Getting off topic.
Oh, well, let's jump right back on topic. I like what you were saying just before you made the Riverside plug, and make sure everybody tune in. Now I'm plugging it. Now make sure everyone tune in on Riverside next go round, because we miss everybody in the chat and having good conversations here. But I was listening to a podcast the other day with Mr. Larry Fink. Now Larry Fink is the man, the myth, the legend over there at BlackRock, and just an insane figure when it comes to Wall Street and managing money. Obviously overseeing BlackRock operations, like you just don't get bigger than that. So what he said, I actually wrote down, and it was right in line with what you were saying, Ron. But what he said was, no one knows what the market will do tomorrow. And I added this one in parentheses, or by next Tuesday.
There you go.
But over the next 10 to 20, 30 years, I'd imagine that economies will grow, innovation will continue, and companies will continue to create value. And I think that's what we have to remember as investors, that over the span of time, right? It's not just that the stock market's going up. Like, what's behind a ticker is a company, and what's behind this quote unquote, smoke screen of the market it's just a collection now of companies. It's the economy as a whole and all the value that's being created. And so it ties into even what Warren Buffett had shared at one point, in that he believes in America, and he believes that the future America will be in a better position than America today. I believe most likely all world economies will be in a better position, or at least striving to be in a better position. And that's important to think about as an investor, because as long as you are investing, you really can't lose. Taking out all the risky bets, talking about your high conviction stocks, the ones that you've done your homework on, these quote unquote high quality opportunities. To be an investor, that is what is going to make you wealthy. And it doesn't even need to be in the stock market, by the way. You could be invested in real estate. You can be invested in a multitude of other assets. But just to be an investor, if you keep saving, you keep working, and you keep saving, you will never become rich.
Yeah, spot on. It's almost like, and probably increasingly so as time goes on, and we hear this quite a bit about the devaluing of the dollar over time, but it is true. It's a true thing. Inflation certainly exists, and increasingly so. It's becoming even more imperative to become an investor because of that. Because if you're not, then your purchasing power is just dwindling over time, and you might be saving cash or you might be saving money, and the dollar amount in your checking account might be going up. But in a weird way, you're actually becoming less wealthy if you're doing that. Even if your cash value is going up, it's just sitting there. You're kind of, I don't like to use the word poor, but you are kind of becoming poorer if you're not putting that cash to work and letting it be productive and letting it work for you. And so I think now more than ever, and probably we'll say this another 5 years from now, the same is true. You have to be investing. It's so interesting to think about this whole investing thing, because it's one of the very few things I think that literally everyone needs to do. You need to be investing in the same way that unless you want to make life harder for yourself, you need to take care of your physical self. You need to be healthy and take care of yourself that way. You also need to be investing. You need to take care of your financial health too, or else you're going to be in a world of hurt.
100%. And I don't know if you saw this, but I don't want to get political with it, but it does involve Trump, and it does involve a bit of politics. But Trump and I forget, he's calling it like the Trump Fund or something like that. I don't know what it's even called. But
Yeah,
the
something like
idea,
that.
the idea of what he has recently put into motion is that, and Ryan, or those of you in the comments, correct me if I'm wrong. I think they're investing like $1,000 per kid, and it's just going to be invested in like a broad market fund. And this is the beginning, I think, of something that has, I mean, first of all, it's never been done before in this capacity. And I think it's just amazing. It goes to show that people will never be rich without investing. This investing is the key to wealth. You need to be invested in assets that are growing. And I like the comment that just came in. Politics and business walk in tandem. And unfortunately, they argue in or debate at times. I totally agree. I only ever caution with, the politics, because everybody is, a freaking Fruit Loop and can't talk about anything, that might cause some strife these days. But that's the reality. The reality is you will never be rich without investing. And this new bill, or what's set into motion right now, is the very beginning, I think, the first time in which Americans will begin to really see the power of investing. And hopefully this will spark massive change well into the future too, in regards to maybe some kid growing up one day and asking, well, how the heck did this $1,000 become X amount,
Yeah, I think I don't know all of the details. I read a little bit about it yesterday. Um, but I think they were projecting, I don't even know who it was, but someone was projecting that like by 18 years old, that $1,000 could turn into like 170,000. And I don't remember if there were any contributions or anything on top of that. I'm sure there were. But some of the other details around those accounts, whatever they're called, I think it is called like a Trump account or something like that. It kind of seems similar to a 529 from what I read. I think that the max contribution amount is $5,000 per year. I believe those are tax deferred, and I think that you can withdraw the gains and all that stuff from the account if it's used for something like education. So similar to a 529 in that regard. I could have some of those details wrong because I haven't read super deep into it. Um, but I don't think helping people get started with investing is I mean, terrible idea. I'm sure that there are people who are going to have some issues with it, just because obviously it is certainly political. But I like I like more people investing. I think that's a net positive. I hope that, and I'm sure there will be some tomfoolery in how the people who receive those funds end up using those funds. Because on the other side of that, giving people, and I know there's restrictions, kind of like I just outlined, but giving people a free $1,000 or just handing them $1,000 is not always, it's not always going to be put to the most productive use. So we'll see what happens with that. But I will say, I'm pretty hopeful. I'm pretty hopeful about this next generation. of investors. The people maybe just below us, Gen Z. What comes after Gen Z? Is it Gen Alpha, then Gen Beta and stuff like that? But at least among, Gen Z, and we've talked about this before, but investing is cool. I think there are so many younger people getting into investing. I mean, I see it. I think you see it. We certainly see it on Blossom. I can't open up Blossom without seeing someone who's like, I'm 15 years old. I'm 16 years old. I'm just now getting into investing. What do you think of my portfolio? And the portfolios can be kind of hit or miss, but it honestly doesn't even matter. The important thing is that they're getting started investing younger now, and it's becoming this cool, trendy thing to do. And I think a lot of younger people are kind of cluing into some of the things we're talking about. Just the fact that you have to be investing if you want to get ahead financially. You have to do it, and you're better off starting now, especially when you probably have no expenses, you have no overhead, maybe you're getting your first job, and you have all this liquidity that you can put into your starter portfolio. I think a lot of younger investors are cluing into that and taking action on it, and I think that's honestly so cool to see. So cool.
These are definitely, I think, the net positives of technology and social media, whether it
Yes.
be a Blossom or whether it be just the ability to connect with creators, even like us, Ryan, or others on YouTube and across platforms, because you're no longer, it's what I spoke about a lot on the Blossom tour. Our voices collectively are much louder than a single, voice trying to chirp, or, just some Joe Schmo out in the middle of nowhere trying to understand this game of investing. Like, you can now connect to people you otherwise would not have been able to connect to. And that helps with motivation. That helps with education. It helps with a wide variety of things that were not at one point available to the average investor. And so that right there in of itself is a major net positive. So I think you're right. I think we are definitely heading in the right direction. I will tell you where I'm a little weary. And I don't really love the whole notion of, of everyone wanting to, work from home, do their own thing. I actually agree with like the Jamie Dimons of the world that for and by the way, this Steve Jobs was a big advocate for like working from the office, in the office with your team. Synergy means something, and new ideas and collaboration actually builds technology much quicker than just being in a Zoom room. So where I'm weary is like I feel like as we move net positively in one direction, there's a negative in the other direction. It will just be interesting
Sure.
to see what happens over the next 10 years. I think
Yeah.
we will continue to advance. I worry about our ability to like actually come together, because I don't feel that anybody's really talking anymore. By the way, I even think like there's just so many silos on the internet, and what I preach all the time, for me is like, hey, I only got to where I am as an investor because I started jumping into other niches of investing and asking questions and tearing down walls to learn and learn and learn. But I feel like that's not necessarily always happening with the internet, and you're really just defending a lot of the times your own point. And no matter what it is, but even with investing, I mean, how many times we talk about this war between growth investors and dividend investors? Well, it's like, why can't you just be like the hybrid,
Yeah.
investor who's investing according to your profile? There's a lot to be said there.
Well, dude, it's so interesting because I think when it comes to investing, people have their teams, right? It almost becomes tribal, kind of like there's New York Jets fans, and there's also New York Giants fans, or Yankees fans and Mets fans. I think it can be pretty tribal to a similar degree, but I think when it comes to investing, it doesn't really exactly work like that. We like to put things in boxes because it makes it neat, it makes it tidy, and it just makes it easy to categorize things in one way or another. But when it comes to these companies that we're investing in, like in so many cases, can they be both? Can things be both growth and also dividends? And it's funny because this is actually a conversation I struggle with, because even in saying that and fully believing it to be true, I still call myself a dividend investor. So I kind of put myself in my own box by claiming that. Um, but the reason I still do, hopefully this will make sense. The reason I still do is because I still solely invest in dividend paying stocks. However, a lot of the stocks that I do own are also, maybe you'd call them quote unquote growth. Visa is a great example of that. I think Clear Secure is a great example of that. Williams Sonoma has been a great example of that. And all of that's to say, these companies that we're investing in are not just one thing or another thing. They can be both things at the same time. And so when it comes to, and I think that's, kind of why people expand beyond just being a dividend investor and saying I'm a dividend growth investor. Honestly, kind of while we're on the subject, I don't know why you'd want to be anything else. Why wouldn't you want to invest in something that's growing, whether it pays a dividend or not? I think growing in some capacity should be non-negotiable. When it comes to investing in companies, which remember is what we're doing at the end of the day, I'm on my soapbox now. I apologize, guys. And Ari, I apologize too. But at the end of the day, if you're investing in companies, I mean, don't you just want to invest in companies who are growing their sales and growing their profits and growing their free cash flow? I think that's the whole point, isn't it? Why would you want to invest in something that's losing customers consistently? Obviously, companies go through blips and they go through, phases, but generally speaking, why would you want to invest in something that's losing customers or like shrinking its profits? It just doesn't seem like a good investment. And so overall, when it comes to investing, I don't know. I think I'm kind of getting to the point with it where I think these conversations are just, they're pointless. Everyone's got their own way of doing things. And oftentimes, like, you kind of commingle. If you invest in dividend stocks and you want to invest in growth stocks, like the two go hand in hand in a lot of ways, I think. So I think it's a silly conversation. And I even think, even though I'm not personally, as everyone knows, nor is Ari, like big fans of some of these high yield covered call funds, man, even arguing against that is so silly. People are going to do what they're going to do at the end of the day. And me arguing about it with someone in the, or you, or, whoever else, arguing about it in the comments on Blossom or X or in YouTube, it's not going to make a difference. People are going to do what they're going to do at the end of the day. And if they're going to change the way they do things, it will be because they stuck their hand on the stove and it was hot, not because you said something.
I'll add to that and just say there is a time and a place for everything. There's a time and a place for the covered call ETFs. There is certainly a time and a place, and with the right strategy in mind or with the right game plan, use them. But use them like a fool, like a lot of us are doing today. We see people losing money with them. We see people not understanding what rock is. We see people trying to understand why some of these funds are not appreciating over time, and they're depreciating and they're losing money. So, there's just sometimes I gotta say, you gotta, as an investor, first of all, know what you're investing into. Don't buy things for the sake of, because they're labeled income. And if income is really what you're after, you got to ask yourself the question, why? Depending on, again, your investor profile. Because there's a time and a place for everything. These these tools, I'll say, these products that are coming out are only coming out because, well, the general investor public wanted them, and they can find them useful. Otherwise, they wouldn't be created. It's kind of like when you think about a sign that's on the grass that says, don't walk on the grass, Why is that sign there, or a any sign really? They're there because people would do the thing that the sign is telling you to do or not to do, right? So don't walk on this grass means that people were walking on that grass before, and maybe the grass died, or sometimes I see walking my dog. Curb your dog and don't let the dog like pass the certain tree point. It's
Yeah.
because dogs were going beyond that point and eating or peeing on flowers and doing their thing. So the sign's there for a reason. And why I'm saying that is because these products were created for a reason. And it's your job as an investor to understand why those products were created and for whom they were created. Because if you look again at the prospectus of all of these funds, these new funds that come out, they are, for the vast majority of them, reset daily. They are reset daily to meet daily goals, not weekly, not monthly, and not annual goals. Daily, which means that you have to watch them on a daily basis and you have to trade them on a daily or weekly basis. So that these strategies could definitely make people money for sure. However, time and a place and according to your strategy. That's so important because, Ryan, I like you even said, I think like the first time ever you were like, I still call myself a dividend investor, but I started investing in some of these other companies. That's kind of how I started my like journey to where I'm at now, right? It's like, well, I just erased the word dividend investor and then just started saying investor because I was like, why am I so focused just on dividends? Like, yeah, they work and yeah, they got me started and yeah, they got me to where I was. But it's like that book, what got me here won't get me there. And I had to make adjustments. Now I just see myself as an investor and I feel freer to make investments because I'm not, blinding myself to just what defines as quote unquote dividend investor. Products, there's products galore for all of us as investors. It's our job as an investor to make the right decisions at the right time with the right information to invest in these products. And by the way, just because you're winning, right? And when I say like, maybe you're not losing money in the market, I look at it, you can look at it through the lens of sports. I might be one heck of I was in high school a running back, a linebacker. I was, a solid football player. My brother was a 10x better football player. And, or NFL players, obviously better football players, right? So I am going to find people who I think are doing better than me and seeing the results that I want to see. And I'm going to try to do what they're doing, but not just by copycatting, but actually by studying and learning, right? That's the real key. It's you don't just go on YouTube and say like, oh, Ryan's invested in these stocks, Ari's invested in these stocks, I'm going to invest them. No, look at what we're invested into and then understand why we're invested in them and learn from it. And that's how I think you develop as an investor over time. But you could do good, but you can always do better.
Yeah, well, this obviously is a never-ending game. It's an infinite game, and so there's always ways to continue improving or refining your process. And the cool thing about having all these different viewpoints is that you can learn from people doing different things, and you don't have to become an exact replica of those people. You can kind of pick and choose the things about how they do things. You can kind of pick and choose the parts of that resonate with you and adopt your own style based on that. And I think that's kind of like the natural progression of an investor. We start out with the Ben Grahams and the Warren Buffetts and the Charlie Mungers, and then you expand just to other people that you hear about, Terry Smith or Monish Pabrai or Peter Lynch, and you kind of pick and choose the different parts of how they did things, which were all different, by the way. Like everyone, different ways to do things to get to the same outcome. Or as Russ likes to say, there's more than one way to get to financial heaven. But you learn from all these different people who've gotten to where you want to go, and in studying the different people, you realize everyone's done it a little bit differently, and you can kind of, just to repeat myself again, pick and choose what you liked about how they did something, and over time, that's going to result in you having your own way of doing things, and extends beyond just the great guys. It also applies to people like myself and Ari, or really anyone that you come across who's an investor, because everyone's going to have their own method to the madness. And so just take what you can from all these different people, and eventually you'll have your own style. And you kind of get a feel for those things too. Well, it's like the
You
question is,
know,
how do you know? Well, how do you know what to take? How do you know what's good? It's kind of a feeling. Like you kind of just, in reading someone's book or watching their videos, you kind of just have a feeling of what you like about what they have to say, and bring that into your own mold. And I'll give you an example. I just finished reading The Dividend Imperative by Daniel Paris, and if we had a spectrum of, and I'm gonna put things in boxes for a sec, even though I shouldn't. If honest, this spectrum, we had growth on one side and dividends on the other side. I think Daniel Paris is like far on the dividend side. Like he's all the way on that side. And there's things that I like about what he has to say. I like, primarily, I was talking to Russ about this recently too. I like that there's like a philosophical component to why he thinks a dividend is important. It's not just about the income. It's about the relationship that it creates between you as the shareholder or the business owner and the people who are running that business. And so in reading his work, I've really taken that from him. I haven't taken everything, but that's one of the things that I've taken from him. Now, on the other side of that, like I'll go with like a Terry Smith, who I would say is more on the growth side. He wrote the book Investing for Growth. Man, there's a lot that I liked about him too. The whole idea that you want to be investing in businesses who are reinvesting back into themselves, because that's what's going to further the growth over a long period of time, and that's where a lot of returns can come from. It's like I took that from him as well, and then pairing that with what I learned from Daniel Paris, and also what I've learned from Warren and Charlie and all these other guys, and doing that over time, I'm kind of like coming up with my own method to the madness. It's inspired by all these other people, but it's mushed together into something that I've created and molded, and works for me and resonates with me. And the last thing I'll say on this too, in when it comes to just following the people you see online, I want to, or even just as it pertains to these conversations, keep in mind too, like you watch someone long enough and you think you really know these people. Like maybe you think you really know Ari, or you think you really know me. And you probably do know a lot about us, but keep in mind too, there is so much about our lives and our temperaments and our personas and our psychologies and our lives that you really don't get to see. And so it's also hard to take what we're doing and apply that to yourself without question, because you really know a fraction about us, a fraction of what there is to really, really know about us. And our upbringings, our backgrounds, our psychologies, are just innate. I don't know, our the genes we have, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. All of these things play into how you are as an investor, and I think that can be forgotten about. I think it's easy to just look at someone, on YouTube and know whether or not they have a good strategy just based on the little bit about them that and the little bit that they show you in their lives. Anyway, I'll wrap it up there, because I'll talk in circles. But does all of that make sense, Ari?
yeah, for sure. I think the last thing you said being the most important, I think, everybody has to understand, very little even about the people that are your best friends, that are, heck, even family. I think it's really important for everybody to understand you just barely know really anybody. As much as you want to say that you know someone inside and out, it's the classic, you'll never know someone unless you walk in their shoes, and the reality is you'll never walk actually in someone's shoes, aside from your own shoes, which means that you should just be questioning. Like I hate when I see certain comments that come in, oh, this guy got lucky, or I see it a lot, because I do Masters of the Market, and I have a tremendous privilege and honor of interviewing so many investors. And I do want to say this. I've seen it only, first of all, on the videos where I've had women on. But this comment usually comes in, and it actually breaks my heart. Um, I'll get comments on those videos, and they'll say, "Daddy's money." Yet I know these people more than obviously these random viewers, and I know their backstories. And you know what I think it is? I think it's insecurity. I think it's jealousy. I think it's
envy.
incompetence. Yeah, and I just think at the end of the day, first of all, for me, I'm not going to, you know, for me, I like a woman who is able to work and hustle and respects her dollar, and
Now we're
I
getting into the
just,
juicy stuff.
I find, yeah, the juicy stuff at 59 minutes or 51 minutes in. I find it insanely attractive when women are just like, a lady boss, like they just crush it, because I know what I deliver as a male, and so that doesn't make me insecure, it makes me more secure. And talk about a power couple. We're no longer living in the day and age where the woman just typically will stay home and do nothing and raise kids. Like the time we're living in today really is women are getting out there and they're crushing their work life, you know. Um, and so I see these comments, come in. And it just, I just want to. I've actually wrote a reply to some of them, and then I delete it because it's not worth it. But I just blow some of these guys up, man. Because I'm like, she's probably making,
Yeah.
10x the amount you are. She's definitely invested past more than what you have, And so instead of just saying, wow, kudos, that's awesome. Oh, daddy's money, right? So I just wanted to say that was on my mind. But, what I also want to say is that the strongest thing I think any investor can do is put themselves in in like an investor crucible, and how do you do that? You find a circle of investors, who don't invest like you, and you say, here's my portfolio. I want you to rip holes in it. I want you to shred this thing to pieces. What am I doing wrong? What can I do better? Where are all the flaws with it? Now, it doesn't mean at all that you're doing anything wrong, but it will allow you to invite other investors in to give you an honest critique of your portfolio, whether or not you want to make investment, moves there after that, and change your portfolio, alter the portfolio. It's totally up to you. But your boldness, your willingness to do that will help you at the end of the day. It will help you think about where other people are coming at it from and to see their positions. And not only that, if you're really feeling bold, go to the people who have, 2, 3, 4, 5 times the amount in their portfolios and say, here's my portfolio. I see what you're doing. Can we talk about your strategy versus mine? And have these conversations. They will help you grow. It doesn't mean you need to make all the changes. But, to Ryan's point, what he was just sharing, looking at other YouTubers, not knowing, creators, YouTubers, financiers, whoever, not knowing their whole life story, well, get to know their whole life story, right? Get to know as much as you can about them. Ryan and I are as available right now on this chat and in the comments and in our Blossom DMs. You could literally at this point, this day and age, reach out to us, get to know us on a much deeper level than just like, hey, I see your portfolio, thumbs up, right? Hey, you just hit $400,000 in your brokerage account, thumbs up. Okay, cool. Message me if you're not there yet and say, what are you doing? What worked? What didn't work? Or message other people who are where you want to go in life. I'm repping right now a FinCon t-shirt. The slogan of this shirt is Money Nerds Unite. And I love that because it's at places like FinCon, in places like the Blossom Tour, in places like the chat that we have right now, we can have conversation. You can grow here. And if you're only going to, watch the YouTubers who talk about your strategy, you're failing yourself. If you're only going to connect to the investors that invest the exact same way that you do, you're failing yourself. You should be questioning. In order to grow, you need to feel pain. In order to feel pain, it's going to come with not feeling so great about yourself on your high pedestal. And here's the reality. You're not the greatest investor of all time. So like I think about that all the time. I, Ari Gutman, am not the greatest investor of all time. So that allows me to go out there and seek investors out who are doing better than me and then ask them with humility, how can I do better? What are some things that you see in my portfolio that you would change? Again, doesn't mean I have to change it, but it gives me ideas.
And by the way, it's totally fine to admit that you're not the best investor ever. And I also think it's fine too to not have that as your goal. In a similar vein, I think you can go out and shoot hoops and play basketball without wanting to be the next LeBron or the next Kobe. I don't. I think it's okay to approach this as a hobbyist, and that's not to say you should be willy nilly about it. You should certainly, make an effort to improve because there's utility in this hobby. It can directly improve your life. But I think it's okay to approach this whole thing knowing that you're not going to be probably not going to be the next Peter Lynch or the next Warren or the next Charlie or anything like that. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't try, but if that's not something you're striving for, I also think that is okay. The important thing is, in my opinion, is that you are still working to improve and becoming, 1% better tomorrow than you were today, and just continue like committing to making that a part of your process. Just it is a journey of continuous improvement. That's true both when you look at the numbers in your portfolio and also the skill set that you get from doing this over a period of time. It really is all about personal and financial growth. The two really go hand in hand. So I don't know what else I was going to add to that. I'll just leave it there.
I want to pick up and say that, it's like Kobe Bryant, man. Like he always talked about
Yeah.
being number two. Play like you're number two. The moment you think you're number one, you've lost already. The moment you think you're top dog, you're
Yeah.
already done. You have to always be learning, and like for me, that's what keeps me hungry. You have to be, first of all, insanely humble. Very, very successful people, in my opinion, are not successful. Very, very wealthy people are very humble people. And I don't mean wealth just in a monetary sense. It's easy to generate a lot of money. It's hard to be wealthy. Wealth, in my opinion, really comes down to this like well-rounded whole like scope of, someone who's intrinsically wealthy. They're free, they're secure. And I think that comes from keeping humble, knowing yourself well. But with this approach, having humility as an investor is going to be your greatest key. Knowing the greatest truth is that you really don't know, and that the more you ask why and what and how, this is the true key to really learning. And all the investors, good investors that I've spoken to, they're always learning. Even on the podcast I was listening to the other day with Larry Fink, he said it. I am always learning. I've been in this business for 50 years, and every single day I take at least 1 hour to try to learn something new within an industry or within something going on in the market. I'm always reading. I'm always learning. Things are always changing. And so for 50 years, man, this guy has been at this, just learning. And I think that another thing that Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger always spoke about, like you have to keep learning. And when you keep learning, it's really just you sharing that you don't know it all. And that's the key. And that's, man, I think if there's one message, Ryan, that we went back to time and time again this episode, it's like utilize this community keep yourself humble, ask questions, and this is how you grow as an investor.
So, with all of that said, kind of tying all of this together, talking about community and continuing to learn and all that jazz. Guys, the book club is top of mind. We were talking about this before we started recording. We need to set a date for when we're going to do our big community chat with you guys. We'll talk about it after we finish recording, but I just wanted to let you guys know. We know we haven't put out a date yet. We will here pretty soon. It's on our radar, and we're stoked to hash all of this stuff out with you guys. Before we wrap it up, though, Ari, kind of sticking to this conversation, I wanted to ask you, like, you know, what are because what are some things that you do daily or weekly or on a regular basis to be kind of like Larry Fink in the sense of just continuing to learn. I know podcasts are obviously it, but like what does that continuous learning routine look like for you? What are all the things that you do for that?
First of all, it's a continuous process of me every single day saying I don't know everything. I like that, and that's not a joke. That's not like I literally every morning, I wake up. I'm right now on my own 30-day challenge doing something that's requiring me to wake up at 4 a.m. And I wake up at 4 a.m. and I get out of bed. My dog's still at the end of the bed sleeping. She looks up at me and she's like, "It's time to go outside." Not yet, and so she goes back to sleep. I get out of the bed. I make a cup of coffee. I have my little routine, and a part of that routine is me literally saying to myself, "You only have today, and you don't know everything." And it just helps me humble myself every day to say, like, you're gonna have to learn today. And so where are you gonna learn? And I will spend a good hour in the morning at this point, reading, studying the markets, reading through a manual that is, I working on Wall Street. There are certain products I don't deal in, right? Like, for example, I don't deal in municipal bonds. But Ryan, I want to be the absolute best on Wall Street. I want to be the person on Wall Street that anybody and everybody can come to and ask me questions, literally like a Larry Fink or like a Warren Buffett. And so that's going to require me to know about an assortment. I don't work in insurance products, but I can tell you about annuities and life insurance. And so whether they're fixed or variable annuities, I don't need to know about annuities, but I'm studying all this because in order to become the best in your craft, that's what you need to do. And I'm doing this every day, an hour or 2 hours, then I walk my dog, and then I come back and I go back to reading, and so I'm also reading every day. Right now I'm reading a book, The Geometry of Wealth. So, very similar, you're reading always, but I think that's a big part of it. It's like, learn. The day you stop learning is the day you start setting yourself up for failure, because there's bound to be moments of time where new things are going to, new events, new incidences, they're going to come out of left field, new questions, so taking that approach, man, I am trying to learn as much as I can, even from people. I do a lot of speaking events. I do coaching, but I listen very, very closely into what people ask, how people say things. I'm very, very inquisitive. And I've realized that that's what some of the brightest minds do. They remain inquisitive. Don't talk as much, right? We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so try to do less talking, which is ironic because we're podcast hosts.
I know. I was going to say, I definitely have a problem with that one.
This is our hour to talk, man. But I think that's one of the most important things is always be learning and listening, adapting, and, that's something that just has set me up for to be a professional. That's I think the key. You know.
Hmm. Are there
What
any
about
when it
you?
comes to well, real quick, when it comes to keeping tabs on the market, just on a day to day, are there, do you have any go to publications? Are you just scanning like Yahoo News? What do you where do you turn to keep tabs on just generally on the market on the macro?
Well, I like first of all, I like to go through and this is not necessarily just me claiming this to be my routine. But this is an assortment of Larry Fink, of Bill Ackman, of Jamie Dimon. These guys will read through various papers like the Wall Street Journal, right? The Times. They're reading through as much as they can because this is what the retail investors are reading. And so the reason why a lot of, these, I want to say bigger shots are reading this is because what's printed in those papers is what the masses are going to be reading. And so the masses are going to have a reaction to what's written in their books versus our numbers. And I think that's pretty interesting. So, investing in the markets is really just a game of psychology. Okay, if you get a big headline that says, the market's crashing 20%, what's going to happen that day? Everyone's going to be selling. They're going to be panicking. They're going to be freaking out, right? So you can read what the average retail investor is consuming and get a pretty good gauge on how the day is going to look. You can get a pretty good gauge, on the investor sentiment that's out there because the news really is manufacturing it. So I do join some of those I admire in reading various newspapers and online newspapers, I should say, and journals. I like to take my walks with podcasts. When I walk my dog, I'm always listening to a podcast. Every now and then I'm listening to music, but typically it's something that's going to give me something, so by the end of my hour and a half, 2 hour walk, I'm walking away with new thoughts, new ideas. And then of course on Saturday, I take one day out of the whole week where I have no technology on me. I have nothing. And so that Saturday walk is really just me in my own mind. And that's really cool because now it's an assortment of the whole week and then my own thoughts, just me on Saturday. And that's also very helpful. Learning to put your technology away and get off social media helps you think clearer.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, because there's so much noise out there, especially when it comes to the news. I mean, like you said, the news manufactures a lot of the chaos sometimes, a lot of that noise, and so you have to turn that off if you want to have a clear mind and think through things that are going on. You have to kind of balance that intake with the reflection. It's those two things. And in doing so, you might come to find that when you do turn off the noise, turn that volume down, you might come to find that you're really not missing out on too much. And so, personally speaking, like when it comes to keeping tabs on everything, because I'm totally with you. And I've heard too that the guys like Jamie Dimon or Larry Fink, all the big guys read all the big publications on a daily basis, and there's an allure to that to me. I think that's cool, and I like that routine, sitting down with a cup of coffee in the morning, going through the journal, seeing what's happening today. And there's been periods of my investing journey where I've done that. I've been thinking about getting back into the Wall Street Journal lately. I don't subscribe to it right now, but they run these deals. I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen these where they'll do like $1 a week or $1.50 per week if you want like Barron's and what is the other one, Market Watch or something, or Market, I think it's Market Watch. So you can get all three of them for $1.50 a week for like the first year. And so I've been thinking about taking advantage of that again. But when I did it in the past, it's like most days I would come to find that there wasn't really anything that mattered much to my personal situation. It's interesting info, but like I felt like I was probably better off reading other things. And so, these days when it comes to just keeping tabs on the general market, one of the top two places I go for that are number one, and not in any order, depends on the day, Seeking Alpha. I'll see what my portfolio is doing. I'll see what the market's doing. and it'll show you like the breaking news or the top news for the day. And so I scan those headlines, and if anything, seems pertinent, I'll clue in on it a bit more. I also do it on Blossom because you get a similar thing. If you open up the feed, I mean, people are posting about what's going on in their portfolios with certain stocks, just broad market news. They've got the what's it called? The daily buzz. They've got the weekly buzz and the daily buzz. So I'll typically read that for like the high level stuff, but it's kind of the same thing. It just doesn't do much for me. And then outside of that, kind of like you, I'm big into podcasts. Typically, if I'm driving or running or working out, I'll listen to podcasts. There's one that I've really been loving lately. It's called Talking Billions. I'd highly recommend it. The host is a guy named Bogomil Baranowski, and oh my gosh, this guy has the voice of an angel. Like, you guys listen to the podcast or anything he's in, you'll know what I'm talking about. Just so soft spoken, but a lot of great info from that. Podcasts are great. What else? I don't know. Obviously books, but I will say I've kind of gotten away. Moving forward, I think I'll read less investing specific books. I feel like I've read, you kind of get to a point, I don't know if you feel this too, but you kind of get to the point after reading a handful of investing books where they all kind of start to say the same thing. I've read Investing for Growth. I've read What to Learn About Investing from Darwin. I've read, whatever else. I mean, add another investing book in there. And it's like they all say the same thing: invest in high quality businesses with high returns on invested capital, have a long term time horizon, make sure they don't have a crazy amount of debt, make sure they're growing, and the rest kind of works itself out. And so after reading a handful of books that more or less say that, I think moving forward, I'm going to switch gears in what I'm reading. And I'm kind of getting more into like biographies lately. So that's been interesting. And I'm trying to follow that. I'm trying to follow that curiosity as far as the reading goes. So, but those are the few things. And there's still like, there's not enough time, man. Not enough time to take it all in.
I've been a big fan of biographies, and I typically, what I do work in, again with a podcast, like a great podcast, The Diary of a CEO is just a phenomenal podcast. But that's very similar to biographies, and so I highly recommend biographies because I was always intrigued by how bright thinkers think, and so you can often see, or at least when I watch interviewers interview, like Jeff Bezos is a great example, or Elon Musk, or Bill Gates, or any of these, Tim Cook, Steve Jobs. They actually really think through questions. They don't ever just like spitfire an answer. And so if you really watch them, I always like, for me, I want to be like them. I want to think like them. And so I need to learn what happened in their life, how they came to be who they are. And I really am a huge advocate. If you want to be a CEO, you're not waking up anymore at 8:30 a.m. Like that's so that
Dude,
came from reading biographies and realizing like all the common denominators that these CEOs have. They wake up early, they're healthy, they read, they're bettering themselves constantly. I think everybody has to freaking put their social media down. What we see today in social media is so freaking stupid. You have Joe Schmo on Instagram saying he's a CEO, but what, he has an income of like $2,000, a month. Well, what whoop-de-doo? Okay, go look at the CEOs who are like in charge of multi-billion-dollar corporations. How are they running their life? Even multi-million-dollar corporations. Instagram and this crap that we see on social media is not a good source to learn how to be a successful individual, I think. It's in reading and studying those who are really at the top of their industries. And the people who are really at the top of their industries, Jamie Dimon, let's just say, keep throwing him around, right? They're not creating TikTok videos. Like they're just not. And that's not to say that whoever's watching this, if you like creating TikTok videos or consuming TikTok, it's all good. But start to look at the 1%. This is what I started doing a long time ago, and it changed my life forever. Start to just look at the 1%ers. What are they doing on a daily basis that makes them fundamentally different than the 99%? And they are always willing to do and doing what the 99% of people aren't willing to do or don't do. 99% of people, Ryan, don't wake up at 4 a.m. I'm up at 4 a.m. I've earned 2 hours back in my day before half this world wakes up. You know?
It's funny. I've had a similar conversation with my mom about waking up earlier. I phrased it that same way. Even because these days I'm getting up 5:30 somewhere in there. But man, even comparing that to someone who, I mean, let's even say 6 a.m. Comparing that to someone who wakes up at 7, which I feel like is a pretty standard wake up time for a lot of people. It obviously depends, and some of you guys might disagree with that in the comments. But I feel like 7 o'clock is a pretty fair, number. Man, even just waking up an hour before then, that's 7 extra hours back that you get every single week. That's basically, well, that's a day in, that's like, a day and a third that you get back across the course of a month. Just waking up an hour earlier every single day. And I don't know, over a long period of time, if you can stick with that routine and you can fill that time with something productive, it's really going to have a compounding effect. But I mean, these days, man, I'm kind of with you. I'm not a 4 a.m. guy. There's periods of time throughout the year where I will be that early, but 5:30 to me is pretty perfect, and it's my favorite time of day. I'm so excited, like before going to bed, knowing that I get to wake up early. It's going to be quiet. I get to have a nice fresh cup of coffee, and I get to sit down and read. It's my favorite way to start the day. I don't always get to do it every day. Like this morning, I woke up and just went right to the gym, which is still good, like still a good productive thing. But my favorite thing is just getting up, catching the sunrise, having a cup of coffee, and just diving into reading something. Can't beat it.
Oh yeah, man. Right there with you. Just on the other side of this computer, there's a big window, and I got the whole sunrise in front of me. So that's what I wake up to. Sunrise, for me comes up around 6:30. So I'm up at, nice and early, and it's pitch black. And I actually have, if I turn this light down, everybody can see that I have the green light. And so this is typically the lighting in the morning, just nice and soothing, my cup of coffee, and I'm off to the races, reading and just better. And then all of a sudden, man, an hour and a half or so later, I look up the window, boom, whole sky is red, orange, beautiful. And there's just no better way to start the day. And then I get to walk my dog. And what's cool on the walk with my dog is I was already up for 2 hours,
Yeah.
2.5 hours doing something productive. And you can't lose. But it does all go back to literally what we keep going back to this entire podcast episode, man, is learning and growing. This is how you do it.
Through consistency and discipline, because it takes both of those things to be able to establish that routine in the first place. And no surprise, same thing applies inside your portfolio too, guys. It all comes back to that discipline and consistency in time. It compounds both in and outside of your portfolio.
Love it. Ryan, we've been on now an hour, 20 minutes, man. It's almost too easy these days to keep these deep end conversations running. But we want to hear from you guys in the chat. Let us know what you thought about this episode. How are you guys learning and improving on a daily, weekly basis, or even monthly, maybe for some of the stragglers that are out there? But we'd love to know how you guys are doing it. We want you to join us, of course, in the next episode live with us. So just make sure you're tuning in, keeping up to speed when we post the Riverside link so you can be here with us. Ryan, I'll kick it back to you to take us out.
Yeah, thank you guys all so much for hanging out with us. One thing I didn't say earlier, last thing, then we'll wrap it up. One thing I did not say earlier when talking about our 1 year anniversary here on the podcast is that this is also the time of year when things like Spotify Wrapped come out or YouTube Wrapped. I think this is the first time they've done that come out, where you get to see a full recap of the content you've consumed throughout the course of the year. And I got so many messages across all platforms from people just sending screenshots showing that we were in like their top podcast listened to or one of them this year, and I was so blown away by that. Like some of these people were people that other creators that I look up to and I follow and I consume their stuff regularly, and that was such a I don't know, such a bewildering feeling to see that, just knowing that some of you guys are in the top 1%, top 0.1%, top 0.5%, in that top of our audience. And so I just want to thank you guys all so much for the support on behalf of both myself and Ari. Thank you guys so much for all of the support and all of the time you've spent with us this past year. Um, yeah, I meant to mention that earlier, and it slipped my mind, so I apologize. But I sincerely thank you guys so much because it truly means the world, and I think it speaks to I don't know. I just think it speaks to how much of a craving there is for this type of information. I think this hopefully is like, good productive stuff to listen to. At least that's our intent. So I think it means you guys get something out of these conversations. I know we do, and with that, I mean it's a win-win, and I don't know what more you could ask for. So thank you guys again. I will wrap it up there. We will see you guys next week. I think by then we'll have a date for you guys on some of the book club stuff. So stay on the lookout for that. You guys have a great weekend, and we'll see you in the next one.